the one hiding under your bed, teeth ground sharp and eyes glowing red.
Disclaimer. Not a dream. I was wide awake. This morning I stayed up late studying for exams. It's 5 a.m. and I lay down. I'm tired, facing the wall. In front of me on my bed, I have a book about chest level. Suddenly I feel an energy around my legs. Kinda like the sensation you get when you're near something that radiates energy. Soon after the sensation, I feel it. I'm being pulled down slowly. I'm terrified. It's a few minutes until I fidget and sit up and gather the courage to look down and around the room. I see nothing and lay back down. Again, the sensation. I notice that I'm moving because the book that was at chest level is now closer to shoulder level. At this point, I'm trying to calm myself and try to reason with what's going on. I'm not superstitious, but I keep up with law. I have a mirror at the foot of my bed, which is supposed to be really bad placement in Chinese law. So at that moment, I get up and move it, because I don't know what else to do. I lay back down and yet again the sensation. But this time, I'm being pulled at an angle towards the book. My heart is racing, and then I feel the energy move around my entire body. I try to fight it, and when it hit 6 a.m, it stopped, and I dozed off. This isn't the first time it happened. This is the second time. The first time was about 2 weeks ago, same time of day. I don't know what to make of it. Note, I've only been in this house for 3 months. It had been a long day spring cleaning my room. I wasn't done, so all the things I had under my bed were piled up in the corner of my room. I washed my face and brushed my teeth, as that is my usual night routine, and then I went to bed. I was really tired and was looking forward to getting some sleep. While laying in bed, I could feel the presence of someone in the room. I ignored it because it happens all the time. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, and suddenly I could feel someone slowly laying down beside me. I froze, and then I felt a hand brushing against my leg. Scared to my bones, I jumped up and turned on the light. And guess what? No one was there. Still scared and in shock, I sat down on the bed with my feet on the floor. And just when I finally calmed down, someone grabbed my leg from under the bed and tried to pull me under. I quickly pulled up my legs and crawled to the corner of my bed. Tears started to fall down my cheeks, and I took my phone and texted my brother and mother. I cried until my brother came into my room, and I just knew one thing. I did not want to sleep in my room that night. And from now on, I always have a bunch of boxes and other stuff under my bed. I've always had a spirit, or many of them following me, I suppose. I once had a very scary spirit here with me that kept scaring me until I told it to go away about a month or two ago. And during those few weeks I felt calm and could go to the toilet in the middle of the night and even just sleep without having a feeling of being stared at. But a week ago, I started having the feeling again, and random knocks under my bed and someone always making my mirror doors dirty with handmade drawings. I have my whole other wall made out of mirror doors. My little sister, 3 years old, kept lying next to my bed and looking down there and giggling. Then she started talking about a boy who lives under my bed. 3 days ago, I literally saw the boy. I was coming out of our bathroom, and a very young boy, maybe 6 years old, walked past me without even looking at me. He looked very anxious, sad, and just genuinely lost. I was talking to my girlfriend about him, and she told me to try and communicate with him, and so I did. I told him 1 noise meaning yes, and 2 noises meaning no, and started asking questions. Answers I got summed up here. He is a 6-year-old boy who lives under my bed. He's afraid of the other spirits in my house, and that's why he's hiding under my bed. He also told me that there had been a spirit that left when I asked her to. So I have a ghost boy under my bed. I'm pretty scared, although he told me that he is kind but scared. I think that he is even more scared than I am. I sometimes talk to him about stuff and once left my sister's ball for him to play with. Maybe he'll one day get to move on to some place where he doesn't need to be scared. Maybe one day he'll get to move on to some place where he doesn't need to be scared. This occurred when I was around 10 years old. I grew up in a small town and lived in a 3-bedroom, 1,500 square foot house with 6 people. This meant my sisters and I shared a small room. My grandma decided she was tired of having no space in our room, with 3 single beds, and it was time to get a bunk bed. In this small town, I remember shopping for this bunk bed in this rundown store. It wasn't the typical furniture store. I almost believe it was a second-hand shop or some type of discount store. By the time I was in my teens, this building was turned into a billiard and game room. The place wasn't there long. The exciting day arrived. We put the bunk bed in the room, moved in the dresser with a small black and white TV and an Atari. These were not new but moved from another location in the house. This is the late 80s. Yes, we had an Atari when everyone else had a Nintendo or an SNES. The Atari and TV were placed so that I could sit on the end of the single bed and use it as a chair while we played the Atari. The space between the single bed and bunk bed was approximately 2 to 3 feet. This is when the paranormal activity in our room started to become frequent. I had opted to take the single bed since my sisters really wanted to sleep in the cool bunk bed. Anyway, one night I remember being in the room alone playing on the Atari. My grandma and mum were talking to some family members that had stopped by, and my sisters were watching TV in the family room. Again, small house, small room. I know I was alone in the room. Being alone and being alone with the Atari was something that didn't happen often. I was focused on my game, when to my right, I could hear the bunk bed shake a little, like someone had just grabbed it and shook it for a second. That had to be my imagination, right? A few seconds more go by and the thing shakes again, this time for a few seconds. I remember distinctly telling myself, "Don't be afraid, don't look, don't be afraid, it's nothing." Almost to a new high score, and if I die, I don't have to give anyone else a turn. Motivation to stay. A few more seconds go by as I keep planning my game. It shakes a 3rd time, for what I remember being the same interval as the last. Again, I tell myself to be strong. Don't be afraid. It's just your imagination, don't even look. Well, with whatever was happening, I must have pissed it off with my lack of response or acknowledgement. The bunk bed began violently shaking with no stop. I just stood up and ran, dropping the Atari paddle and hearing it swing into the dresser. I didn't get to beat my high score. My grandma and mum didn't believe me. I was laughed at by the visiting family members. At least I didn't have to sleep in that bunk bed or go back into that room by myself. My sisters have some other more scary stories, like an old man ghost standing on the end of the bed, climbing the ladder with glowing white hair. One was hearing glass shatter in the room and not being able to find the source. Quite a few more, but that was my personal scary story. We ended up having a house fire due to a malfunctioning AC unit 4 years later, and it destroyed that bed. After restoring the house and damages, my twin and I ended up moving back into the room with the 2 single beds. The air in that room felt lighter and more free. I've never had a paranormal experience in that room after that. Hence, we dubbed it the haunted bunk bed. This didn't happen to me, but to my older sisters. I wasn't born yet. I think this was in either Colorado or Germany, but either way, glad my mum's a badass. One of the main things about my mother is that she is a very spiritual Catholic. She kind of borders between being a devout Catholic, but I think she is more spiritual. She always told us that if we ever get scared, we should say the Holy Family's name and pray. Anywho, my older sisters told me that during this time they had shared a room and a bed. They said that every night they would hear and feel something scratching under the bed. They told my ma, and she just told them to clean their room. A few nights later, they felt and heard it again. The next morning, they again told my ma, and again she told them to clean, but this time to really do a deep job when it came to under the bed. They did this, and later my mum told them that, again, if they felt scared, that they should say the Holy Family names and pray. It didn't happen that night, but eventually it did happen again. This time my sister said what our mother said, and the scratching stopped. Thinking it was over, my sisters settled back into their bed, only to have the bed smacked by something, shaking a little. They ran over to Mum's room and slept there. Morning came and my sisters went to school. Dad went to work. My mum said that she decided to check under the bed this time, clean it herself. She did and was shocked to see fingernail scratches embedded into the wood under the bed. She said that they were deep and long, and she knew in that moment something wasn't right. She said she put everything back, stood in the middle of the room and basically told the thing off. She told whatever it was that it wasn't welcome in their home, that in the name of her faith that gave her protection and strength, it needed to leave. She turned on her heel to leave, closing the door. My mum told me that a loud bang came from the door, shaking it a little, as she made her first steps. She spun around, reopened the door, and again recited what she said prior, but said it a little louder and a little more pissed. The room didn't give them any more trouble, and they soon moved out, and they soon moved again. We are a military family, so we moved around a lot. My mum doesn't like to be pushed around, often defends herself with any situation, and she said that included the paranormal that thought it could mess with her children. This happened to me about 10 years ago, but still sticks with me to this day. I was around 15 years old, and my mum and dad decided we would take a trip to my aunt and uncle's new house they had just bought in Gridley, Illinois, and stay for a few days. We lived in central Indiana, so it was about a 3.5-hour drive to get there. The house was an old farmhouse, probably built in the early to mid 1900s, and sat very isolated, basically in the middle of a cornfield. I have a very large family, and a few more of my mum's siblings travelled to the house as well, so they were going to have a big party. My uncle who owns the house has a son about a year or two younger than me. We will call him Steve. So my cousin Steve and I had been hanging out all night, playing video games, spending time with our families, etc. Everyone was up fairly late, and as people started going to bed and the party was dying down, Steve and I decided to go to his room and crash for the night. Steve has a pretty small bedroom. I would say about 10 foot by 10 foot, but he did have bunk beds, so there was plenty of room for both of us to sleep in there. He normally slept on the bottom bunk, so I climbed up top to lay down for the night. As I did basically every night, I would pull out my phone and check my MySpace or Facebook, whatever I was using at the time. So after laying there for about 5 minutes, Steve gets out of bed and said he needs to use the restroom. The head of the bed is right next to the door, so I look down and watch him leave the room and shut the door behind him. His room was basically pitch black dark, but there was some light in the hallway, so I clearly saw him leave. So at this point, I'm lying on the top bunk in his room by myself, in basically pitch black darkness, besides the light from my cell phone. He was gone for maybe a minute when, all of a sudden, the bunk bed started slamming into the wall behind me. Like there was someone at the foot of the bed, rocking the bunk bed back into the wall. As it's slamming into the wall, my first thought was maybe one of Steve's older brothers is playing a prank or something. So I say, cut it out, that's not funny. The bed continues to slam into the wall. It did it probably 10 times total, probably once every second or two. I wait for it to stop and hop down off the bunk bed to turn on the lights, expecting someone to be standing at the end of the bed laughing at me. I turn on the lights and nothing. Nobody is in the room, just me. Like I said, it is a very small room, and I made sure to check everywhere. Under the bed, in his closet. I was the only person in the room. At this point, I'm just completely terrified, and I'm trying to rationalize what just happened. I decide maybe the bed is just rickety, and I was rocking it somehow. I go to the foot of the bed and try to recreate what just happened to me. Not happening. This bed is one of those all-metal bunk beds, bolted together, and it isn't budging. The only way to get the bed to move the way it did would be to slide the entire bed back into the wall and then slide it back. This thing was on carpet as well, so it was not moving. I tried with all my strength to mimic what I had felt, and it was just not happening. At this point, I'm just in total panic mode. I run out of the room down the hallway to the bathroom and ask my cousin what the hell he was doing, and he told me he had to poop. I asked him if he was just in the room fucking with me, and he asked what I was talking about. I explained what happened, and once he was out of the bathroom, we went back to his room and talked about it. He said that he and his family have almost all experienced some kind of paranormal happening since they moved into the house. Safe to say that that night I did not sleep in his room. I went and slept on the floor next to the bed where my parents were sleeping. This is the only time in my life I have ever experienced anything paranormal. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you liked that video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who allowed me to use their stories. A link to each story will be in the description below. If you have a story you'd like to share on my channel, please send it to my email, which is also in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for your continued support. I really do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.